Emma had walked the same dirt trail behind her family's farmhouse every evening since school let out for the summer. It was her little escape, a place where her imagination ran wild, among the wildflowers, buzzing bees, and towering trees. But that day felt different. The air was heavier, the wind slower, and even the birds seemed quieter. She paused at the fork in the trail, where the well-worn path curved left toward the creek. But something caught her attention to the right, a narrow, less-traveled path, half hidden by ferns and overgrown grass. Emma had never gone that way. Her mom had once told her not to, saying it led deeper into the forest, too far from the house. But curiosity tugged at her feet. Just a quick peek, she told herself. Pushing aside a curtain of leaves, Emma stepped into the shaded trail. The deeper she went, the quieter it became. The crunch of twigs under her sneakers echoed louder than usual, and even the breeze seemed to hush. After a few more careful steps, she heard it, a soft, uneven sound, a breath, maybe a whimper. She stopped. About 20 feet ahead, near a fallen log, lay a shape so still she wasn't sure it was alive at first. Then it moved barely. A massive, gray-furred creature lifted its head just slightly, meeting her gaze with pale golden eyes. Emma's breath caught in her throat. It was a wolf. She'd only seen wolves in books and on documentaries, never in real life, and certainly never this close. Its fur was matted and streaked with dirt. One of its front paws was tucked underneath its body at a strange angle. There was dried blood on its leg. Its ribs moved slowly, chest rising and falling with difficulty. But what struck her most were the eyes, tired, alert, and somehow calm. Emma didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she stood frozen, locked in a stare with the wild animal. For a few long seconds, nothing moved. Then the wolf's tongue lolled out slightly. It was panting, dry and slow. It's thirsty, she thought. Emma slowly backed away, careful not to make sudden noise. Once she reached the start of the path again, she turned and ran, heart pounding in her ears, feet flying over roots and stones. She burst through the back door of the house and grabbed the first water bottle she could find. "What are you doing?" her mom called from the kitchen. "Nothing, just thirsty," Emma shouted, already heading out again. She also grabbed one of the dog's metal bowls from the porch, then sprinted back toward the woods. "This is crazy," she thought. "It's a real wolf. It could hurt me." But something in her heart told her it wouldn't. When she returned to the spot, the wolf hadn't moved much. Its eyes followed her, but it didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth. Emma stayed low, moving slowly as she unscrewed the water bottle and poured it into the bowl. Her hands were shaking so much the water splashed over the edges. Then she slid the bowl a few feet closer. The wolf flinched, then sniffed. It didn't move at first, but after a moment, it shifted slightly forward and lapped at the water's slow, grateful gulps. Emma exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. She sat cross-legged, far enough not to intrude, but close enough to watch. The wolf kept drinking, eyes never leaving her. Somehow, she wasn't afraid anymore. She felt something she couldn't quite explain, a connection. After a few minutes, the wolf lay its head back down, eyes fluttering shut. Emma whispered, "I hope you feel better soon." She sat a little longer, watching the trees sway above them both. Then, as the sky turned gold with the setting sun, she rose and quietly walked home, never knowing that this single moment would change her life forever. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed with the window open, listening to the distant rustle of leaves outside. The image of the wolf's eyes stayed with her, those deep, golden eyes that didn't look angry or wild, just tired, and maybe even trusting. She'd never seen anything like that before. The way it had lapped up the water, so slowly, so carefully, it felt like it knew she was trying to help. The next morning, she was up before sunrise. While her parents were still asleep, Emma quietly dressed, filled the same metal bowl with clean water, and snuck out with a small container of leftover roast chicken from the fridge. She paused at the edge of the woods, heart pounding again. What if it was gone? Or worse, what if it had never been real? She made her way down the narrow path, careful with every step. When she reached the same spot, her breath caught in her throat. The wolf was still there. It hadn't moved much, but its eyes opened when she approached. It looked weaker than the day before, but it lifted its head just slightly, as if recognizing her. The bowl from yesterday lay empty beside it. Emma placed the fresh one down gently and unwrapped the chicken, placing it on a flat stone nearby. "You're still here," she whispered. The wolf sniffed the air and, after a few moments, leaned forward. It didn't leap or snatch. Instead, it nudged the food slowly with its nose before taking a careful bite. Emma sat quietly nearby, not moving, just watching in awe. She'd expected fear, maybe aggression, but there was none, only silence, and a strange, peaceful stillness between them. Emma looked closer at its injured paw. There was dried blood crusted around a deep gash, and its leg was swelling. She wished she could help more, but she didn't dare get closer. For now, this was enough. She spent almost an hour there, just sitting while the wolf ate and drank. Birds called overhead, and a light breeze whispered through the trees. It didn't feel like she was sitting next to a wild animal anymore. It felt like she was keeping a promise. Back at the house, Emma finally told her parents everything. "There's a wolf in the woods," she said at breakfast. "It's hurt. I gave it water. I think it remembers me." Her father chuckled. Wolf? Are you sure it wasn't just a big dog?" "No, Dad. It's a wolf. It was limping, and it let me sit near it. I brought it food this morning." Her mom gave her a look that mixed concern and disbelief. "Honey, I don't think it's safe to be near a wild animal, even if it looks calm. You shouldn't go back. They're alone." "But it's not dangerous," Emma said quickly. "It's weak, and it didn't growl or anything. It just needed help." Her parents exchanged a glance, but said no more. That afternoon, Emma sat by the porch, watching the woods. She couldn't stop thinking about the way the wolf had looked at her, like it saw something in her no one else did. She wondered if animals could feel gratitude, or maybe they just knew when someone meant no harm. At dusk, she returned once more. This time, she didn't bring food, just water and her presence. She wanted to be sure the wolf knew it wasn't alone. To her surprise, when she arrived, the wolf was standing. It limped slowly toward the edge of the clearing, pausing to look back at her. Then it disappeared into the trees. Emma stood frozen, not sure what to feel. Sadness that it was leaving, or pride that maybe she'd done enough. She whispered, "Goodbye." But what she didn't know was that the story was far from over. The forest had watched her kindness, and it would soon respond in a way her whole family would never forget. Emma stood at the edge of the forest long after the wolf disappeared from sight. The last glance it gave her before vanishing felt like something more than coincidence. It was deliberate, almost like a silent farewell. She didn't cry, but a strange ache settled in her chest. The clearing felt emptier without the wolf lying there, breathing slowly, trusting her with its silence. That evening, she sat with her knees pulled to her chest on the porch swing, her fingers tracing circles on the wooden armrest. Her parents talked quietly in the kitchen, glancing out the window at her now and then. They didn't bring up the wolf again, perhaps hoping she'd let it go. But Emma couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't just that she had helped a wild animal, it was the way it had looked at her, like it understood something most people didn't. The next morning, she still filled the metal bowl with water and returned to the clearing. Her steps were lighter, not because she expected the wolf to still be there, but because she wanted to leave behind a piece of care just in case. The clearing was empty, no fur, no blood, no sign of the wolf except for faint paw prints that led toward the deeper woods. She placed the bowl down in the usual spot and sat cross-legged beside it. The air was crisp, and beams of sunlight filtered through the branches, dancing on the ground like golden ribbons. Emma pulled a notebook from her backpack. She hadn't planned to bring it, but she found herself drawing what she remembered: the wolf's face, the way it had limped, how it drank the water without fear. She even wrote a few words below the sketch. He didn't look like he wanted to hurt anyone. After that day, the routine became part of her life. Each morning, she returned to the clearing with water and sometimes bits of food. She never saw the wolf again, but sometimes the bowl would be tipped over, or the food would be gone. Once, she found a few gray hairs left behind on a stick. Another time, small paw prints appeared near the base of a tree. One morning, Emma discovered a feather long, white, and perfectly clean, resting right where she'd left the water bowl. She looked around, confused. It hadn't been windy. There were no birds that matched its size nearby. She picked it up and smiled. Maybe it meant nothing, or maybe, just maybe, it was a quiet gift. Her parents noticed the change in her. Emma was always kind, but now she was more thoughtful, quieter, as if she was carrying a secret only the forest could understand. They didn't press her about the wolf anymore. Her father still believed it had been a large stray dog, but her mother wasn't so sure. Sometimes, her mom said one evening as they watched the sunset, "The world gives us a moment that doesn't make sense at first, but it stays with us because it's trying to teach us something." Emma looked toward the trees. "I think he was teaching me not to be afraid, and to trust what I feel." Her mom nodded, brushing Emma's hair gently behind her ear. Then, maybe that wolf knew exactly who he needed to meet. That night, Emma returned to the porch swing. She stared into the dark silhouette of the woods and wondered where the wolf had gone. Was it still limping? Had it rejoined a pack? Would she ever see it again? She didn't know. But what she did know deep in her heart was that kindness had passed between them. No words, no noise, just stillness and understanding. And somehow, that felt louder than anything else in the world. Days passed. Emma continued her quiet routine, leaving water, sometimes food, and always a little bit of hope at the clearing. But there were no more paw prints, no tipped bowls, no new feathers. The woods had fallen completely silent again. Each morning she sat for a few minutes longer, waiting for some sign, something to tell her the wolf hadn't just been a dream. But the stillness felt different now, final. On the 5th day, she stayed much longer than usual. The sky was overcast, the air a little cooler. She sat on her usual spot near the log where the wolf had once rested and looked around carefully. No movement, no sound, just a distant crow somewhere far above the trees. She sighed and stood, brushing off her jeans. Maybe he had healed and left. That's what she told herself. He had recovered and returned to wherever he came from. She wanted to believe that. Back at home, her father was stacking firewood by the shed while her mom clipped herbs in the garden. No more visits, her dad asked casually. Emma shook her head. Nothing. Well, maybe he's better. Wolves don't hang around people, even kind ones. She nodded slowly, but a part of her missed the quiet companionship that had bloomed between them. Even if it had only lasted a few days, it had felt real, more real than anything she'd ever read in books. That night, a strange energy stirred in the air. The wind was stronger. The trees swayed harder. Emma sat by the window in her bedroom, staring out at the forest line. She couldn't explain it, but something felt different. She didn't see anything unusual, just darkness and trees. But still, she kept watching, heart fluttering. The next evening, just after dinner, Emma went outside with her glass of juice and sat on the porch swing. The sun was setting slowly behind the trees, casting golden light across the yard. Her parents were inside washing dishes, music playing low from the kitchen radio. She took a sip of her drink, then froze, her eyes locked onto the edge of the forest. Something was there. She blinked, unsure if her eyes were playing tricks on her, but no. She could see them clearly now. 3 figures. They stood just beyond the tree line, still, silent. Emma's breath caught. Her glass slipped slightly in her grip, nearly falling from her lap. Wolves. Not just any wolves. One of them limped slightly as it stepped forward. The familiar hitch in its gait unmistakable. It was him, her wolf. Her chest tightened as her eyes welled up with disbelief and awe. He was alive. Not only that, he wasn't alone. The 2 wolves flanking him stood tall, alert, but calm. They didn't growl or snarl. They didn't move any closer. All 3 simply stared at her with quiet intensity, like they had come for a reason. Emma stood up slowly, her heart thudding wildly. She didn't move forward. She knew better. She just stood there on the porch, arms at her sides, looking back. Her parents stepped out behind her, both stopping abruptly. "Emma," her mother whispered. Her dad blinked, eyes wide. "Is that—" "Yes," Emma said softly. "It's him." For a long moment, no one said a word. The wolves remained completely still. The breeze rustled through the leaves, the last rays of sun catching the faint silver in the wolves' coats. Then, as silently as they had come, the wolves turned. One by one, they slipped back into the woods, first the larger ones, then the limping one. Just before he vanished into the trees, the injured wolf turned his head. He looked at Emma. Not for long. Just enough. Then he disappeared into the shadows. Emma didn't say a word. Her family stood behind her in stunned silence. Nothing about that evening made sense. And yet, it made all the sense in the world to her. The wolf had come back not because it needed her, but because it remembered her. For the rest of the evening, the house stayed unusually quiet. Emma sat at the dining table, picking at her food. Her mother kept glancing out the window, and her father hadn't said much since the wolves disappeared into the trees. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was thoughtful, like everyone was trying to understand something they had no words for. Finally, her dad cleared his throat. "I've lived next to these woods my whole life. Never seen wolves come that close to a house." Emma looked up. "He came back to show me he was okay." Her mom nodded slowly. "Maybe, or maybe they were just passing through." Emma said nothing. She didn't need to argue. In her heart, she knew the truth. That night, she dreamed of the forest, not the way it looked in daylight, but deeper, older, more alive. Trees bent toward her as she walked through them. Moonlight shimmered through the branches. She heard soft howls in the distance, not threatening, but beautiful. And when she turned a corner in the path, the limping wolf was there, standing tall and whole again. He didn't move. He just looked at her, as if waiting. Emma woke up before the dream ended, but the feeling stayed with her like a whisper. The next morning, the world outside looked the same. Sunlight warmed the dewy grass, birds chirped from the fence, and the trees stood silent. But something felt different. As Emma stepped onto the porch, her eyes landed on something at the edge of the yard. She walked slowly, her shoes brushing through the grass. There, right where the wolves had stood the night before, was a small pile of smooth stones stacked in a perfect tower. Balanced, delicate, intentional. She knelt beside it, heart thudding. She didn't build it. Her parents hadn't either. She looked around, half expecting to see something watching her from the trees, but the forest was quiet. "Mom," she called softly. Her mother joined her moments later, staring down at the little stone stack. "Did you do this?" Emma shook her head. "I found it like this." Her mom crouched beside her and studied it carefully. "Looks like someone placed them really gently. No mud, no leaves stuck between. Like it's been here since this morning." Emma nodded slowly. "It's a sign." Her mom didn't argue. After that day, more strange little gifts appeared. A perfectly round pinnacone, placed neatly on the porch railing. A white pebble shaped like a heart, sitting at the base of the tree near the garden. A ring of acorns laid in a circle beside the tool, shed each one untouched. Not a single crack or bite mark. Emma's parents started to watch the woods differently after that. They still didn't speak much about the wolves, but the tension had turned to curiosity. Her dad even installed a trail camera by the edge of the woods, hoping to catch sight of the animals. "Just want to know what else lives out there," he explained with a shrug. That was no ordinary visit, but when the first photos came back, they didn't show wolves. They showed shadows, faint, elegant shapes that looked like movement, but never quite resolved into anything. Solid, a blur, a streak of gray, a flash of fur that vanished between frames. Yet the gifts kept coming. Emma started keeping them in a wooden box beneath her bed. She didn't show anyone what was inside, not even her mom. It felt private, like a quiet conversation between her and the forest. And deep down, she began to understand something few people ever did. The wild has a memory. It may not speak like humans do. It may not leave thank you cards or say goodbye, but it knows kindness when it sees it. And sometimes it remembers. It didn't take long for the neighbors to notice. Mrs. Calderon, who lived 2 houses down and walked her dog every morning, mentioned seeing a large animal slipping through the woods just after sunrise. Could have sworn it was a wolf, she told Emma's mother at the farmer's market. But it didn't run, just stood there, looking at me like it was waiting. Soon after, a young boy from school told Emma, "My grandpa says the wolves are back. Says it's a sign the forest is waking up again." Emma didn't respond. She only smiled quietly and walked away. At home, Things felt different now. Her parents no longer discouraged her visits to the woods. In fact, her dad sometimes walked with her to the edge of the trees, carrying a flashlight just in case. Not to stop her but to see what might happen. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Emma returned to the clearing alone. She hadn't been there in over a week. She wasn't sure why, it just felt like the right time. She sat on the familiar log and looked around. Everything was still, peaceful. The wind rustled gently above the canopy. Dappled sunlight painted golden patterns on the ground. She pulled the wooden box from her backpack and opened it. The pinnacone, the white pebble, a pressed leaf, a tiny, smooth stick shaped like a crescent. Every object perfectly preserved, untouched by weather or time. She didn't know where they came from, but they always appeared on days when her thoughts were the loudest. That day, she whispered softly to the air, "I miss you." No sound answered. No movement. Just the wind. But as she stood to leave, she noticed something unusual, a new path. It hadn't been there before. The ground looked recently disturbed, dirt loosened, grass flattened. Not the kind made by people, but by quiet, careful feet, animal feet. Emma hesitated. Her instincts told her not to be afraid, so she followed it. The path twisted gently deeper than she'd ever gone alone. As she walked, the forest grew thicker, the air cooler, but she felt no fear, only the pull of something familiar. Then, just beyond a thick cluster of trees, she stepped into a small hollow. Her breath caught in. The center was a shallow dip in the earth, like a resting place. Surrounding it were more smooth stones, stacked, balanced, carefully arranged in a loose circle. Flowers bloomed between them, wild ones, untouched, and lying in the center, nearly camouflaged by its fur and stillness, was the wolf. He looked older now. His limp was gone. His coat gleamed in the low light, and when he raised his head and looked at her, Emma's heart filled with something too large to name. He didn't move to greet her. He didn't run. He just lay there, calm, peaceful. And behind him, Emma's breath hitched. Two smaller wolves appeared from the trees, young, curious, ears perked forward, eyes wide. Pups. Emma gasped softly, a hand covering her mouth. She understood now. He hadn't just healed. He had returned to his world and brought new life into it. She didn't move closer. She didn't need to. The wolf closed his eyes again and rested his head against the ground. The pups watched her, then trotted to his side, nuzzling into his fur. Emma turned and stepped back through the trees, heart thudding, chest warm with wonder. She didn't need to see more. She already knew. Back at home, she sat quietly beside her mom in the kitchen. "He has a family now," Emma said softly. Her mom didn't ask how she knew. She just smiled and took her daughter's hand. Sometimes the forest keeps its promises, and sometimes it gives more than anyone ever expected. The days that followed felt lighter somehow, like the whole town was breathing differently. Even if no one could explain why. Emma didn't speak much about what she had seen in the hollow. She didn't need to. Something about that moment felt sacred, like it belonged to the forest, to the wolf and his pups, and to her alone. But even in silence, the change in her was clear. She walked taller now, not louder, but more present. And when people talked about strange sightings in the woods, she listened without correcting or questioning. She simply nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. One afternoon, her teacher paused during science class to tell a story about seeing an animal near the school parking lot late the previous night. "I know it sounds strange," he admitted, laughing, "but it looked like a wolf, big, silent, and standing near the trees. It didn't run. It just watched me, then vanished." Some of the students chuckled. Others whispered theories. Emma didn't laugh. She met her teacher's eyes and said gently, "Maybe it was just checking if we're paying attention." Her classmates fell quiet. After school, one of the older girls approached her. "You really believe in all that stuff? Wolves coming back, the forest watching us?" Emma didn't hesitate. "I think the forest listens, and maybe it remembers. Who treats it kindly?" The girl didn't reply right away. Then she muttered, "That's actually kind of cool," before walking off. As the weeks went on, more people began noticing the small, strange things. Birds nested closer to homes. Wildflowers bloomed in places they hadn't in years. Deer appeared at dusk near the roadside, not running away but standing quietly, blinking at passing cars as if they belonged there just as much as anyone else. Dotmer Hansen, who used to yell at squirrels for digging up his garden, built a little wooden platform with seeds and berries. Figure it's better to invite them than to fight them, he joked. At the community center, children painted forest scenes during art hour without being asked. Trees, wolves, stars, and streams appeared in bright color after color. One little boy even painted a limping wolf with two pups by its side. Though he hadn't heard Emma's story, when asked what inspired him, he shrugged and said, "I saw them in a dream." Wordless, Emma simply stared at the painting, a shiver running down her spine. Something was changing, not loud or dramatic but gently, like ripples in still water. And at the center of it was that first moment, that first choice, a little girl kneeling in the woods, offering water to an injured animal without fear. Emma's father, once skeptical, started keeping a journal, not about wolves but about the trees, the weather, the way things had begun to feel different in the mornings. "Can't explain it," he told Emma one night by the fire, "but it's like the land's waking up again, like we're finally being noticed." Her mother began saving herbs in cloth bundles, gifting them to neighbors with warm bread and gentle advice. For calm sleep, she'd say, or to ease a heavy heart. Nobody asked how she knew which ones to use. They just smiled and accepted. Through it all, Emma returned to the woods, not every day but when her heart told her it was time. Sometimes she found new feathers, sometimes paw prints. Once, she saw the pups playing at a distance, their fur catching sunlight like sparks. She didn't chase after them. She only watched. And in those moments, she understood. Kindness may start small, but when it's real, it grows roots. And sometimes, when you give without asking anything in return, the world answers back in ways that speak louder than words. The seasons began to change. The summer's heat softened into gentle autumn breezes. Leaves turned brilliant shades of gold, amber, and red, falling softly to carpet the forest floor. The air smelled crisp, fresh, filled with the scent of earth and wood smoke. Emma stood at the edge of the woods one afternoon, watching the sun sink low behind the trees. Her heart felt full, heavy with all she had learned since that first day she gave water to the injured wolf. The forest had changed her family. It had changed the whole town. And most of all, it had changed her. She thought about the wolves, the father who had limped but returned strong, the playful pups now growing braver every day. She thought about the small gifts left quietly in the clearing, and the way the land itself seemed to breathe and respond. For the first time, Emma truly understood the meaning of kindness. It wasn't just about being nice, it was about connection, respect, a promise kept between worlds that didn't always speak the same language. That promise lived in the way she cared for the forest, in the way her family began planting trees and leaving space for wildflowers, in the way neighbors stopped clearing every stray branch or stone, choosing instead to let nature be, to share the land rather than own it. One evening, Emma's father came home carrying a small sapling wrapped carefully in burlap. "It's a young oak," he said, setting it down gently in the yard. "Figured we could plant it where you first saw the wolf." Emma smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. A promise tree. Her mom helped dig the hole. Together, they planted it, pressing earth around the roots and watering the small trunk carefully. The next day, Emma took the wooden box filled with gifts and placed it beneath the new oak. A pebble, a pinnacone, a pressed leaf, reminders of the quiet bond between them and the forest. Her parents stood beside her, quiet but proud. As twilight settled, a soft breeze stirred the branches above. Emma looked up and imagined the wolf and his pups watching from somewhere deep in the woods. She whispered, "Thank you." That night, the forest seemed to hum with life, an invisible song that only those who listened closely could hear. Emma's story spread quietly through the town, told in hushed voices and shared smiles. It wasn't a tale of heroism or grand adventure. It was something deeper, a simple truth about how a single act of kindness could ripple through a whole community. And the wolves, they stayed, not just in the forest, but in the hearts of those who learned to see the world with gentle eyes. One chilly morning, as the first frost settled on the grass, Emma walked to the clearing one last time before winter fully arrived. She found the wolves waiting, not just the father and pups, but others too. A small pack, strong and free. They watched her with calm, steady eyes. Emma knelt and touched the earth. "Until next time," she said softly. The wolves turned and disappeared into the trees, their figures melting into the shadows like a living memory. Emma stood, knowing that some bonds are never broken, that kindness once given carries on, carried by the wind, whispered in the rustling leaves, and forever rooted in the heart of the forest. She smiled, feeling the quiet strength of a promise kept, and with that, she walked home.